Hello everybody, welcome back to my workshop and welcome back to my garage. This is video number 3 in my Great Guitar Build Off Scratch Build entry for this year. And what we're going to be doing in today's video is basically bringing you up to speed on how I've got the neck to this point right here. So as you can see, I've got the fretboard installed, I've got slots in the fretboard, I've got my headstock pretty much set to the right thickness. I'm going to be putting a cap on this, a flame maple cap that matches the body. I've got basically the neck smoothed out as much as I can right now before I start to carve the neck profile into it. I'd like to go ahead and add, please, if you like what I'm doing, click like, click subscribe, follow along with the channel, see how things are going. The build's going very well so far. I did take a little bit of a break. Temperatures were like in 105 to 110 here in Tucson, Arizona. So it was just too hot to go out in the workshop, just didn't really want to do it. So it's been a break for a little while, but I'm back rolling in the workshop now and we should be making some pretty good progress on this guitar moving forward. So let's get rolling on the video and it'll bring you up to where I am with the neck to this stage right here. I've got my neck blank. It's already laminated together. Basically it's 2 pieces of canary. Let's see if you can get the grain structure here. It's got a really nice swooping grain structure on this. I'm going to be able to get 2 necks out of this billet because I did make it long enough. I don't know if you can see where I've got it traced out on the side there, but when I bring it in closer, I'll go ahead and do that. So what I want to do is bring this in so you can see it. So as you can see, I've got my outline of my neck traced out. What I'm using is I'm using the Crimson Guitar template set. This is their template set for the Paul Reed Smith. It's set for a 25-inch scale. So what I've done is I've went ahead and I established my center line on the neck, and that's going straight down the center, pretty much right on the glue joint of where I glued the 2 pieces together. And then I've got my neck set out on the center line. So you can see here I've got my nut line established. I've got my headstock angle established where I'm going to be cutting the headstock angle. And then I've got my fretboard. You'll see there's 2 lines here. The first line here is where the fretboard ends. The second line is that little bit extra where it's going to go into the body before I cut off into the space for the pickup cavity on this. So as you can see, I've got 2 necks laid out on this. What I'm going to do is I'm only going to do 1 neck out of this billet right now. I am going to cut the truss rod channels in both sides, seeing as how that I do have the router out. I'll go ahead and establish my truss rod positions here in a minute, and I'm going to go ahead and route the truss rods on both necks. These truss rods will adjust at the nut end of the neck, so I'll go ahead and route that section in as well before I do my angled cut. That way it'll look good going into there. That way I can get the truss rods ready for both necks before I cut out the first neck profile and start working on that. So my truss rod, what I'm going to want it to do is stop just short of the nut. And what I'm going to do is I'll drill the hole through from the other side here. So I'm positioning my truss rod, so I know my end of my truss rod is going to come to, right here is going to be the end of my truss rod. And I'm cutting to right just short of the nut line as well. So let's just check those again. Make sure those are where I want them to be. And they are. That way when I go to route my channel, I'll know where to take the router to. These are dual action truss rods. I got these from Philadelphia Lutherie, I think. They've got some of the best prices out there, so I definitely started buying stuff from them. But these are really good truss rods. I've used them in a couple guitars now, and they're really good dual acting truss rods. To cut my channel, what I've done is I've set up my fence on my router, and then we'll go ahead and get that adjusted to the center line on the neck here in a minute, and we'll start getting this truss rods cut. So what I did, and I wanted to bring this in close so you can see it, is I've installed a V-point bit on my router. And I've lined it right up on the center line. That way that point is exactly on the center line of the neck. Now what I can do is I can swap out and put my 1/4-inch bit that I'm actually going to use to cut the channel in, as I've already set my fence. That way I know that I'm still going to hit the center when I put my bit in. Also what I did is I've checked it on both sides. I went the whole distance of the truss rod route, and I can show you here. Let's bring this up to here and see when I bring it up to the other end, it's still dead on the center line. So this is ready to route now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get it all set up and get ready to route. I'm going to go ahead and swap out the bits, get my depth gauge set to the proper depth so I don't go too deep, and I can route my channels out. What I've done is I've set some clamps up, and those clamps I've got set up to be kind of like stoppage points on the path. That way I know where I'm at. All right, so now that the channel's cut in, the next thing I want to do is I want to enlarge this area right here where the truss rod end fits in. I can do it with chisels, but I'm just going to do it with the router because I've got this nice roundover bit that does it. Now we're just going to route this channel into the headstock. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to clean this up with some chisels and get the truss rod fit to make sure it's all good where I want it to be before I go through and route the other side. Just a little bit here to accommodate the width of it increasing a little bit where the nut goes in. So it's just a little bit extra off. All right, let's see how the truss rod fits in here now. There we go. So you can see the truss rod is nice and flat in the channel. This, although it looks kind of oblong right now, what will happen is as I trim this angle in, that's going to bevel that down to where that'll just disappear off into it and be a smooth transition into the headstock. All right, so as you can see, I've got those trimmed down. I've left enough room here for my line, and what I'll do is I'll plane that smooth. So that way, as I'm planing, as I come back down to this back line here for the nut, I'll know that it's smooth. But I want to plane that down to keep it nice and smooth that headstock out as much as possible. I'll use a combination of rasps and a plane to kind of smooth everything out there and get that ready. I'm going to start off with my rasp just to kind of smooth it out a little bit first. This way it just cuts down on the amount of planing that I have to do. There we go. That's got a bit smoother. Now the plane will work a little bit better. Need to sharpen my planes a little bit. There we go, closing in on the line, nice. All right, that one's good. Bring this in for you. You can see how that's come all the way up to the line now. It's nice and smooth, and it's still nice and square. That'll get hit with the orbital sander. This is going to get a headstock veneer on it anyway, but you can see where I took the bullnose bit and routed into here. You can see how that just tapered into a nice smooth taper right there. So I've got this neck to a little bit more manageable shape now. It's closer to being a neck shape. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and put this on my belt sander and smooth this back out right here. Smooth out the back of the headstock a little bit and smooth up here and just kind of smooth up my cuts a little bit. That way it's a little bit nicer look. That's why it's a little bit smoother. And that way when I go to do the actual carve on this, it's going to be a little bit easier. And I'm going to have a more uniform neck to start with. So let's go ahead and kind of get this. I'm going to be careful because I'm almost to the line now, as you can see. Let's see if we can get in there on that. So I just basically want to smooth this out a little bit and get everything smoothed out. So let's get rolling. All right, see, I hope you can see this now. It's a lot smoother finish now. It's pretty much straight and level. So when I go to do the carve on this, it's going to be much easier. I've kind of got my headstock straightened out a little bit. It's not to the thickness yet that it needs to be because I'm going to be putting a cap on it. So I will be setting up a fence and thicknessing the headstock properly, but I'll do that after I get the wings glued on. And then get the fretboard glued on. But what I'm going to do next is, next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and get this on the bandsaw again, cut it out along these lines right here. And that way the neck will be more to shape. We can get it on the router table, get it routed to the proper shape, and get the wings and everything glued on, and we'll be set. There we go. Just a little bit closer. Now I can get the template glued on and get this thing routed. So I've got the template attached with masking tape and super glue. It's attached here. I've got my bit in the router. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go ahead and use the template as a guide and go ahead and get the neck routed to shape. All right, now that that's mostly routed smooth with the edge, what I'll do is I'll pull the template off now, and that way I can get this last little bit with the template running along the edge of the neck. Neck is all routed to shape. We're ready to, and as you can see, I went ahead and I fixed that area there with the plug inside there. That's glued in, so that's going to be good. What I've done is I went through my fretboards and I decided on this nice piece of flame maple. It's going to match the top really nice, I think, and it's also going to contrast well with the canary on the neck blank. I actually looked at doing some roasted flame maple, but it was just too much of a similar color between the two. All right, so right now I'm just finding the center line on my fretboard because what I want to do is I've got my template, my fret slotting template that I'm going to be gluing this down to. I've got a center line marked on that. I'll mark the center line on the fretboard. That way I know that my fret slots are going to be cut straight and true to one another and perpendicular to the center line on the fretboard. And what I'll do is I've got masking tape on the front and back, and I'll put some super glue on there and glue that down like that. But what I want to do first, like I said, is just find my center line. And the good thing about it is right now, I really don't have to worry about if this center line is in the center of this board or not. Because what I'm doing is by drawing this center line, I'm establishing a center line on where I'm going to base my fretboard off of. And as long as I stay true to that, then I don't have any problems. But I did find the center, just got my center line marked. And now it's just a matter of gluing this down to the board. There we go. And this jig is nice because it's got adjustments here to where I can raise these up or down and basically set the depth that my saw cuts at. I've got them set right now to the depth that I need them. What I'll have to do though is, because I'm putting this fretboard, I'm cutting it prior to radiusing it, what I'll have to do is actually do another cut and trim and go a little bit deeper on the frets after I radius the fretboard, because it's going to shallow with the curvature of the fretboard. It's going to cause the edges to become less to become shallow, and I need those to be the proper thickness. So I'm just going to start cutting these fret slots, show you how to do the first one. This one's actually the nut line. And I just move it till it drops into the next slot. Snug it down with my feet right here. And cut the next slot. And what I have is I have templates for 25-inch scale, 25.5-inch scale, and then Gibson 24.62 scale and Gibson 24.75 scale. And then they sell them in other scales as well. You can get baritone scales, you can get bass scales. So, all right, it's time to go ahead and get this fretboard cut down to size, rough cut. You can see here that I've got the fretboard outlined on this. I've got my frets marked in just so I can kind of keep track where my 3rd, 5th, 7th, etc. are. But what I'm going to do now is just go ahead and cut it just to the outside of these lines. That way when I put it on, when I actually glue it onto the neck, there'll be that little bit of hangover, and then that way I can get the router and flush trim that to the neck. So let's get rolling. And here you have it, just to the outside of the line. Still haven't decided if I'm going to use binding on this neck or not, but I don't have to make that decision right yet. I may put some black binding on it. I think that'd really look good on this neck. I'm getting ready to glue the fretboard on to the neck now that I've got the neck routed to the right shape. So what I've done first off is I've dry clamped the fretboard down to the neck. Lined it up, made sure I'm on my center line. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a couple index marks. I'm going to drill one at the first fret location, going down into the neck, just slightly off to the side of what the truss rod is. And I'm going to drill another one down around the 19th fret in the heel of the neck. And what that's going to allow me to do is that's going to allow me to put some toothpicks in there to where when I put the glue on, I can push this fretboard back down onto there. I know I'm in my alignment pins, and I know that I'm going to have the fretboard on straight, because the fretboard does tend to move, or things tend to move when they're glued together. So by putting those index pins in there, it's going to prevent the neck, or it's going to prevent the fretboard from sliding on the surface, and we'll get a good glue up. So let's go ahead and get our index pins drilled. So you can see the one index hole is right there off to the side. That's still going to be in the meaty part of the neck, and the other one's down here in the heel of the neck, and this one's not going to be any worries because it doesn't have to get carved away at all. Now, it is not a requirement to tape up your truss rod. Some people do. What I like to do is I'll put a little bit of tape on it like I'm doing right now, and then I'll trim this off. This way, what's happening is I'm trimming that little bit of tape off, and I'll pull this off. When I'm spreading my glue, it doesn't get all over the truss rod. And it just keeps glue out of the truss rod channel, basically, is all I'm doing. A little bit's going to get in there anyway from the squeeze out. When you go to squeeze your glue out, some's going to get in there anyway, so it doesn't really matter or not. So what I'll do is now I can spread my glue, and then once my glue's spread, I'll get my fretboard clamp down, or I'll pull that tape off after I spread my glue. So just a quick double check. I've got my truss rod in. I know it works. I've got my alignment pins marked. I've got my fretboard at the ready to go on, and I've got a bunch of clamps ready as well to clamp this up with. And I'm just using Titebond original. I did check to make sure this neck was true, and it is. I put a straight edge on it, and everything was good to go, which I knew it would be because I cut it straight from that billet just today, so it really didn't have time to do any movement. Now, of course, the goal when you're gluing is to have some squeeze out, because that lets you know that you've got enough glue in the joint. But the thing to remember is, if there's excessive squeeze out, that just means you're wasting glue and that you put too much in the joint. Let's go ahead and get the fretboard on. Now you can see how easy it is to do with the alignment pins. That way I know I'm straight, and we can just start clamping. Nice squeeze out all along the neck. Very good glue up. One spot right here. There we go. There we go. That neck's nice and glued up. Let it set. I always let my neck set for at least 24 hours in the clamps. I know the wood glue only says you need to let it set for like 30 minutes, and then you can unclamp it and it gets to full strength after 24 hours. I just like to leave it. Rather safe than sorry, and I'm in no big hurry. So neck's all glued up, fretboard's on. Tomorrow we can pull it out of the clamps. All right, so I went ahead and pulled this out of the clamps. The glue up went really, really well on this. What we're getting ready to do now is go ahead and put it on the router table and flush cut the fretboard to the edge of the neck. So let's get rolling with that. There we go. There we go. You can see a nice glue up all the way down the length of the fretboard on both sides. A really nice glue up with that. All right, well, that's gonna wrap up this video. I hope you like what I'm doing. Again, please, if you like what I'm doing, click like, click subscribe, follow along, take a look at some of my other videos, some of my other builds, some of my pickup builds, and sound samples that are out there. I really appreciate all the support you've been giving to the channel and the comments. I do try and answer every single comment, positive or negative. Luckily, 99.9% of all the comments have been positive, so that's great. So until next time, take care.